I have a question, Judy. I've been thinking about doing I was thinking about doing a retreat before all this happened. What's the best way of just doing a solo retreat at home, if that's possible?
First of all, we'll be announcing a Zoom retreat fairly soon. I don't know that we have the date yet. It will be sometime in May. If you'd like to do an extended sitting on your own, which is what a retreat is, different extents, of course, I would recommend starting with a 5-hour retreat.
Okay.
So sitting for 2.5 hours, which is one of our usual rounds of sitting on a retreat. So for instance, we would sit from 1:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, for instance. So you divide that up into 4 rounds of sitting, a half hour each, with walking meditation between each round. So 4 half-hour rounds with 3 10-minute walking periods, and that would make up the 2.5 hours. And then take a break. You could start in the morning and then have lunch. After lunch, which should be a light lunch, actually rest for a while, or maybe go for a walk, and then return and say at 1:30 to 4, do the second round. If you feel comfortable chanting on your own, I would recommend some chanting at the very beginning and at the very end. And you can certainly chant along to any of our chants online and listen and chant along. I'm not sure you have a chanting book, but that's also available online if you want to, download that. Maybe just start actually with the 4 great vows in the morning and chant the Heart Sutra in English and the Great Dharani at the end. And then after you've chanted those 2, do the 4 great vows again. So that would be a wonderful one-day retreat. It's the schedule we follow on our one-day retreats. Our one-day retreats are actually half-day retreats. So starting at 9:30 in the morning, going until noon, lunch, break until 1:30, and sit and walk until 4, or say 10 minutes to 4. Do the last 2 chants and the 4 great vows. Got it?
Thank you, Stan.
Just do it, man. Good. Are there any other questions?
Stan, this is not a question, but this is Carol Schmidt. I heard Dennis say once, and I've heard this before, Yunman's story about, or Yunman's saying about disease and medicine arise together. The whole world is medicine. And then something else is, and like, what is your true self, or what do you do with this? Or there's a question at the end. Yeah. And that's been on my mind and my heart lately, and I'm wondering if you care to comment on that.
Yes, sickness and medicine cure each other is, I think, the way it's stated. So this, and I've heard different versions of how it's completed. So this whole world is sickness. What are you? Well, then the obvious answer would be, well, you're the medicine to cure the whole world's sickness. I'm not sure that sickness and medicine cure each other is an accurate translation, but sickness and medicine certainly have a reciprocal relationship. So right now, this whole world is sick, not simply with coronavirus, but with all sorts of sickness. And this sickness gives rise to suffering. And the sickness is physical sickness and mental sickness and psychological sickness, things that are actually clinical in nature, and the usual sort of psychological sickness that we all suffer from all the time, and that practice addresses. So our medicine for that kind of sickness especially is practice. That's the medicine. You may, if you look this up online, probably if you just Google sickness and medicine cure each other, I think you'll find several versions. And maybe you'll find one that makes more sense than the one I just gave.
I like one that says medicine and sickness arise together. Just
Yes,
like
I've never heard that one.
It reminds me of Dogen, which is inquiry and response come up together.
Well, it's the reciprocity. That's
yeah.
Whatever the translation is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions? Wenda.
Okay, so Jane, which was a beautiful talk, talked about we're lucky to have this practice, and each moment asking what is this, and I'm wondering, like, for people that are close to us that don't necessarily have this practice and are getting unexpected news, and I mean all the things that are happening, and anxious. How would you explain that to somebody that doesn't have this practice? What is this can be a helpful practice, I guess.
So keeping a great question is fundamental to our practice, but there are also very simple practice techniques that you can teach to anyone. In other words, you have to have some kind of vehicle to carry this question, what is this? Otherwise, maybe just absent-mindedly every now and then saying, what is this? And then giving up after 10 seconds. So I think you certainly can teach simple, very simple meditation practice using the question, what is this? You simply give the sort of instruction that you would give any beginner, but maybe an easier version of it. So to sit in a chair, for instance, but to sit straight, good posture, and then simple breathing. Breathing in for 3 seconds, breathing out for 7 seconds, and asking yourself, what is this? With each breath. You don't have to, when we teach that form, we teach Zen Master Hae Kwang, always taught, you breathe in, what am I? 3 seconds, 7 seconds, breathe out, don't know. The don't know might not be so beautiful, but on the inhalation, breathing it in, just holding the breath for just a second, and then a long exhalation, just letting it go, but then resuming that, and recommending, say, 10 minutes like that. So some such practical vehicle is necessary in order to use this question, what is this? And do recommend eyes open. I'm always asked by friends, when you meditate, are your eyes open or closed? And I always say open, and they're usually surprised. And people associate meditation with kind of closing your eyes and tuning out. So eyes open and you're tuning in. Everything that you see is simply clear. You don't make it good or bad or dwell on it. So it's better to face a wall than face a television set turned on, but it doesn't have to be any special kind of environment. These days, the weather is getting nice, and outdoor practice can be quite wonderful and soothing, and that's something else that people who are really troubled by all of this really need, is simply to be soothed. the breathing helps that. But if there's a garden space in which to do this, I think that would be a wonderful environment. And I think that most people would instantly say, oh, yes. You know, whereas if you're sit in a chair and face a wall, you say, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. You know, so maybe outside if possible, and maybe we should all go into gardens and practice. Certainly, walking outside is itself a good practice, and you can do practice while walking. I mean, we have walking meditation, and so that's something else that you might recommend. And you can coordinate walking with your breath. You know, breathe in for 3 steps, breathe out for 7 seconds, something like that. You know, breathe again, just what is this? And there's the world, you know, before you. And then just and you're breathing out. And the number of steps in and out don't really matter, but 3 in, 7 out is quite doable for anyone. That's what Frank Sinatra did when he was a kid. He says, you know, he attributed his voice to walking and breathing. He didn't call it meditation, but when he was a child. So you might tell people that. Everybody likes Frank Sinatra. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? So we have a few minutes left.
I have a question.
You have a question?
I do. My name is Eric.
Hello, Eric.
Hi. So for the past month, I've been supplementing my regular sitting practice with Sam Harris's Waking Up app. What are your views on kind of these extraneous practices and kind of supplementing your regular practice with them?
I have no experience of them at all. So what is this app like? What does it do? Oh, you're muted now, Eric.
It's a meditation, mindfulness practice app. He usually does a 10-minute guided meditation every day.
Yeah.
He also has talks with people in the mindfulness field. Yeah, so that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so it's basic mindfulness meditation.
Sure. Yeah.
Mindfulness meditation, I think, is not good, not bad. I certainly don't think it can hurt. And for some people, it's maybe the only way to start because it's hard to maintain the discipline of doing a practice, you know, completely on your own. So, you know, you've got a coach, probably with a soothing voice, you know, and you know, maybe that can help. What is your experience of using it?
It's been good. I don't think it hasn't felt as though it's conflicted with my regular practice at all. He's also he talks a lot about non-duality.
Yeah.
Well,
there's some teaching involved as well.
Sure. He's really into the Dzogchen practices. He speaks about that a lot.
Yeah. Do you do them together? Like first you listen to this and then sit, or completely separate sessions?
Separate.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it if you're going to do it. And I don't know what to recommend to anybody who's interested in this because I have no experience with it. But what is this again called, what you're doing?
Waking Up.
It's called Waking Up?
Yeah.
So you had a good experience with that.
Sure.
So maybe people want to try that. I think it's very important to be able to do an independent practice. Following along with someone else, no problem. But as soon as you try to do it by yourself, then your mind appears. And that's what you have to deal with ultimately. So please give up your regular practice. Thank you, Eric. Any other questions?
Yes, this is Kelly. Wonderful to meet you. I'm wondering if you can tell us what you personally find to be most challenging about the current situation.
Well, Judy, my wife, and I have been sheltering at home for quite a while. I have a challenged immune system from a stem cell transplant I had 3 years ago, lymphoma. So we have to be especially careful. We do manage to go for a walk outside every day, but otherwise we're at home. We have a nice yard, so we can get out in the yard. And I wish I had a better schedule and that I followed it better, but doing okay with that. And I think that's important. So personally, you know, day to day, my own life is good. So what's challenging is simply, of course, the thought of this, in some sense, universal suffering added to what had been up until a few months ago already universal suffering, you know, in this world. And the inability to deal with it. So our systems, medical systems, are all challenged. I was in the hospital, what was that, I guess 6 weeks ago? No, maybe just 4 weeks ago, getting one of my usual bi-monthly infusions. And the oncologist, whom I've gotten to know very well over the last almost 3 years and more now, just confided. She says, this is so stressful. And at that point, it had barely begun in our local hospital. But she's very well connected, as I imagine most doctors are, with the medical scene at large. And my heart really goes out as much to the medical practitioners, the doctors and the nurses and the orderlies and everyone who are dealing with this as the patients. It's certainly a good time for Kwanseum Bosal chanting, which is, as you do quantum practice, I assume?
Yes, I do.
Where are you located?
Barcelona currently.
I see. So you're very familiar with the situation yourself.
Yes.
Barcelona. So as I was saying, you know, when people are sick, the chant that we do is Kwanseum Bosal. I've been actually incorporating it into my breathing practice. So I have a breathing practice when sitting, which is a 32 count breath. And Kwanseum Bosal chanting in our melody is 32 counts. So it works out very well, actually, for me. If anybody wants to know more about that, how to do that, please email me. It works well no matter what your breath capacity. You just chant it faster if you have to. You find a pace that coordinates you know, with your breath, inhalation and exhalation. So yes, I find it you know, challenging on different levels, but I also find that this practice really, more than anything else, gives us the resources necessary to cope with it. Somehow I do feel, maybe somehow is too strong a word, that our practice does help this world. And that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you.